The Detroit Pistons once again have pick 5 in the upcoming draft, but who should they take? We'll go through my top candidates for pick 5 in just a moment.
Lane, sky's a jam. Dynamite dunk and the crowd loves it.
Welcome back to Pistons Intellect. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_313. You can also follow us over on Instagram at Pistons_Intellect. And as always, if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. We continue to grow, as I say. I feel like at the start of every episode, and I appreciate all the love, all the comments, all the discussion, the conversation, hearing from fans from Australia, where I'm from. We've got plenty of friends over in Detroit that I've formed in the past few years, and then there's Pistons fans everywhere, Brazil, Turkey. It's really cool connecting with all of you. So appreciate you all coming on this journey with me. And yeah, as I mentioned off the top, the Pistons have pick 5. We've been through what would you call it? The pain and the disbelief of the Pistons falling in the draft lottery after finishing the season with the worst record. For the second straight year, they once again fell to pick number 5. So originally on that day, and I kind of still am of this thought 2 weeks later, I think the Pistons should trade the pick or should be aggressive in looking to trade it and finding a deal that makes sense. Now, Pistons have hired a president of basketball operation in Charles and Langdon. I think I got that right. Appreciate everyone who's been helping me with that. So it remains to be seen if the Pistons will still look to trade that pick. There have been some reports today from shout out to Everything King and Downtown Juice that Troy Weaver is gone from the franchise. Now, nothing has been officially announced from the Pistons or Woj or any of the newsbreakers nationally, but those two Pistons content creators well plugged in, so I take them for their word. But I don't want to elaborate on that too much until we hear from the organization and that kind of thing. But with Troy seemingly gone and Langdon in charge, it remains to be seen if the Pistons are still going to be aggressive to trade that pick or what they look to do. Langdon, it looks like, is a guy who's kind of prioritized wings. He's like going to the draft. He's well known, even in NBL circles here in Australia, is a guy who loves scouting. He has a great relationship with the NBL. He forged his professional career over in the EuroLeague, so he's a guy who loves to scout internationally within the US. So part of me now thinks the Pistons will probably use this draft pick. So brings me to who should the Pistons take with pick 5? Now, we're going to obviously operate under the assumption that the Pistons keep the pick, clearly. Now, this is my first time I spoke about, after the draft lottery, I spoke about Matas Buzelis very briefly. And since then, I've done a little bit more draft research. And after reading mock drafts, going to The Athletic, going to ESPN, The Ringer, No Ceilings, all those content places that put out mock drafts, I've kind of formed the top 5 for myself, and I've put them in order here. And we're going to go through each of the top 5 players I would take at pick 5. And we'll start right away with who I would take if they're available at pick 5. And just before I start, I should say I'm operating under the assumption that Alex Sarr will be off the board. I don't think there's a world he drops all the way to 5. But even this guy I'm going to mention, who I'm going to mention in just a moment, I think it is likely he's gone in the top 2 or top 3. But there is a chance he could slide to the Pistons, and I know the Pistons have a lot of interest in this guy, and that is Zaccharie Risacher. Now, 6'8" wing, French. He's been playing in both the Euro Cup and the French League for JL Borg, who I believe is a French team. As you can see here, I got these stats from Synergy. The stats were this is his averages across 65 games. Now, I feel like this is for his whole pro career. I think he's played like 40-odd games this season. I was a little bit confused, but look, essentially in his pro career in 65 games overseas, he's averaged 11 points, 4 rebounds, 1 steal, 47% from the field, and just a tick under 40% from 3. Now you can see the 2 areas I have highlighted in green here, the size and the shooting. Now, when we think about the Pistons, size on the wing and shooting, the 2 biggest needs, I would say. And I've also been big on defense at the 5, but I just think when you look at the roster makeup and what is missing, it's shooting and size on the wing. Now, I know they've got Fontecchio, potentially Quentin Grimes, but Fontecchio showed a lot. Grimes has a bit to prove, but just in terms of a young, up-and-coming prospect, obviously have Asar Thompson, but the jump is a real concern there. Risacher kind of, if he was to hit his ceiling or kind of from what I've read, he's kind of he is a bit of a upside swing in the sense of he's young, he's from overseas, but he also has been noted to have quite a high floor, and that's because he can shoot the ball and he's a pretty decent defender, especially he's quite good off the ball. So those kind of 3 things put him number 1 on my board. He had some really good showings the other week over in the French League or the Euro Cup, I believe it was, where he had like 28 points and showed kind of some of the athletic tools he has. But yeah, for me, it starts with the size, the shooting, and defensive potential. I think he's just a really nice compliment to Cade Cunningham. He's a pretty good compliment to Asar Thompson. And even if the Pistons do keep someone like Jaden Ivey for another season or 2 and try to develop him, he still fits nicely alongside Cade and Ivey in the sense he can help on the defensive end. I'm not saying he can switch 1 through 5 or anything, but I feel like he can probably take some 2s, take bigger guards, and also obviously 6'8", he can defend the bigger wings. Obviously, he's quite young, so he's going to get taken advantage of as a rookie defensively. More than likely, that's what happens. But I think the tools there, the physical tools and the shooting, for me, and the upside, it was kind of hard for me to go past him if he's available. So the one weakness I've kind of found throughout reading about Risacher and watching some stuff is his lack of on-ball creation to be a lead guy. So I think if you were, how can I put this, someone like the Washington Wizards and you're still looking for your Cade Cunningham or, you know, even your Jaden Ivey, like I know they have Jordan Poole, but if you're still looking for a guy to build your franchise around, so Cade's probably the better thing there. I think that's where teams are little more less inclined to take Risacher because of his lack of on-ball creation to be probably a lead guy. Now in Detroit, I don't think he's going to need to be that lead guy because ideally they have Cade, maybe they have Jaden Ivey, or they go out and get a Brandon Ingram. They're aggressive this summer. I don't think Risacher needs to be that on-ball guy for a while. So maybe that's something he develops over time, but in his first few seasons, I don't think. I kind of hope he's not asked to be a lead guy if the Pistons were to draft him, because that would signal to me they are still heavily rebuilding. So I have him number 1. I'm sure people are going to immediately say he won't be there at 5, but look, I have him there. Number 1, let me know your thoughts on that. Number 2, I have Reed Sheppard. Now, I've seen Sheppard ranked as high as number 1 on some mock drafts and big boards, and I've seen him on the Athletic at 8 and 9. But he seems to be a guy who will be available for the Pistons at 5. Or it would be kind of not a shock, but if he's not available at the Pistons at 5, someone like Risacher or someone else might pop up for the Pistons to take there. Some of the other names I'm going to mention. So Sheppard, though, 20 years old, 6'2", out of Kentucky. Just he came off the bench for most of the season. He started only 5 games out of 32 or 33. 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 54% field goal, and then just a ridiculous 52% from 3. I mean, once again, here with Sheppard, 3-point shooting. It's at the top of my list. I'm looking at a lot of these draft picks and ranking them because you can't argue with that. Like, that's not a mistake. To shoot over 50% from 3 and 2, I don't think is a fluke. Now, clearly, and putting Reed Sheppard here is kind of going against my draft philosophy, or at least how I've ranked players in the past. I've always tried to look for like those wing size players for the Pistons to take, especially last draft, because wings are something they've missed and lacked desperately. 3-and-D type wings. Now Sheppard, 6'2", like this. How can I put this? It kind of almost it's hard for me to put him here because there's a couple of guys that will follow who are more of that mold of that higher upside swing. They have the athletic tools and maybe some of them have the shooting potential, but Sheppard's more like a known commodity. I feel like the shooting will carry over, but he's also, some of his weaknesses are going to become more glaring at the NBA level. So, I mean, in terms of pros, just to round it out, elite shooter, as you can see there. He averaged 2.5 steals and almost 1 block shot per game. So he's disruptive as a defender. He tries, he gives a shit, even if he's a little bit undersized. And then he also measured, I believe, with the equal best max vertical jump at the combine. So I think it was like 42 inches, maybe max vertical. So he has some bounce there. He looks like a pretty stout kind of 6'2" player. Like, so he's got some strength, some athleticism. Now, how that athleticism carries over to finishing, I think his wingspan's around 6'6", 6'2", 6'3". So, it's all well and good on a fast break to have that vertical and be able to get up, but how that works and carries over against when he's trying to score against NBA size rim protectors, I think he might struggle. But look, it's nice to see he does have that max vertical because that can help you defensively as well. So cons, or, I was going to say areas for improvement, but the weaknesses and cons is just the size. Like, he's going to get taken advantage of at the NBA level. Teams are going to pick him out, hunt him for switches, post him up. And while that won't be as much of an issue if he's taken by the Pistons in the first year or two, because I would imagine he'd be coming off the bench, and I imagine the Pistons won't be playing high-level playoff basketball. It won't be the biggest issue, but my feel for him would be like the Peyton Pritchard type thing with the Celtics. Peyton Pritchard was a baller for Baylor. I think he was in that 2021 draft with Cade. He was a bucket. He still is a bucket. Like, he's excellent shooter, excellent pull-up shooter. There's some similarities between him and Reed Sheppard, and it's not just because they're two white guys that are like 6'1". It's just in the way they play, they shoot, and that kind of thing, the way they get their points. So that would be my fear for Sheppard, because we've seen time and time again Peyton Pritchard, when it gets to the playoffs, the Celtics can't put him on the floor. So do you want to invest a top 5 pick in a guy like that? That's where that's kind of my concerns, and why I'm, that's why, I have him at 2 because of the shooting and because of how I think he can help Cade and the Pistons get to that playoff kind of level. But I do have fears about him being a big-time playoff contributor. But at the same time, like I just said, it's like, well, how much should I be putting into that when you're just trying to find, in this draft that's not loaded with stars, you're just trying to find a piece that can help you get to a winning place and play consistently decent basketball. So look, I have him at number 2. I've ranted there. Seen some Pistons fans have Sheppard number 1. Some just can't handle the lack of size. I think that's kind of where a lot of teams are, and a lot of draft experts are with Sheppard. So as always, let me know your thoughts on him. Where do you have Sheppard on your board? And I'm going to move on to my third player here, and that's Donovan Clingan, back-to-back national champion with UConn. 20 years old, 7'3", 14 points, 9 boards, 3 blocks, 64% from the field and 58% from the free throw line. I mean, he would probably be higher on my list if Detroit weren't so desperate for shooting on the wings, or shooting in general, as well as the fact that I didn't kind of think the Pistons need a more experienced center to go alongside Jalen Duren. If the Pistons were to take Clingan, I don't think that would mean Jalen Duren's being traded immediately, because I do think there's a world where Clingan comes in and it's kind of like that Walker Kessler. And once again, I'm not saying that because he's a 7-foot white guy. I'm just saying because, like, in terms of Walker Kessler. He came in and had a really solid defensive impact with the Jazz as a rookie. I could see Klingan doing that, if not like better. So I could see a world where he backs up Jalen Duren, and that kind of works. I still think they need more experience at the center position if they're going to be real about making a substantial jump, or substantial just jump in wins, where that lands on the standings. Like, if they win extra 20 games, that only gets you to 34 wins, which would be just a ridiculous increase in wins. So, yeah, look, I think Duran and Klingan could be a thing short term. Obviously, long term, you would have to pick one, I feel like, before you extend them. You wouldn't extend both, considering they both can't shoot. But, yeah, in terms of Klingan, the player, I mentioned some of his counting stats there. He would immediately be like one of the top 5 or 6 tallest players in the NBA. Just huge. Like I said, 7'3", a wingspan that's like 7'6", but it's 7'8". It's he's got a plus wingspan at that size is huge. He's, like I said, the shot blocking, the rim protection, and then also he moves quite well. He's not like doesn't have cement concrete feet. Like, he's not a guy. I think, and I'm not saying I haven't done enough scouting on Zaccharie, but I think one of the concerns with him is like, is someone like Klingan or Edey going to be a plodding center in the NBA that just get played off the floor? Like, that's why players like Taco Fall, they can't keep up with the speed. Klingan appears to have great mobility for a guy his size. He's, Sam Vecini of The Athletic said he's an elite drop defender. So, whilst he might not have a heap of versatility in the pick and roll, you've got an elite drop defender. And that's how, like, the Jazz built their defense around Rudy Gobert. And other teams have built their defenses around drop bigs, like Brook Lopez. So, with the Bucks. So, look, he can move well, elite drop defender. So, that works well for the Pistons because Duran has kind of been, I don't know what coverage he plays well. It feels like he's played drop a lot of the time, but they've tried other things and it just hasn't really worked out to date. So, and then on top of that, he's passing. He can pass the ball. A lot of handoff stuff with UConn. Pistons run a lot of handoff actions. So if Monty Williams remains a coach, handoffs are ran by every team. So, he would slide right in, solid passer, which you love to see at the center position. Cons, or weaknesses, I should say, the free throw shooting, 58%. I've been very harsh on Jalen Duren recently, but he's improved his free throw shooting tremendously. So, look, something probably be expected with a big man. Typically, they aren't the best free throw shooters, but the ones that don't stretch the floor. But we have heard that he's trying to work on his three-point shot. He shot it well at the combine, but that's a lot of 1-on-0 kind of shooting workouts. It's a lot different when you have a defender closing out on you, or you have just the pressure to make an open shot. So that would probably be the only kind of area for improvement that's popping up right now. So he's number 3. Now, the 4th player I want to get to on my list is Matas Buzelis. He's been mocked on pretty much every mock draft I've seen to the Pistons at 5. 19 years old, 6'9". Played last season with the G League Ignite. 14 points, round up to 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, 46% from the field, and 26% from 3. Now, the G League Ignite are now done, dusted, gone. They won 2 games last season. It was a disaster. Buzelis and Ron Holland were I'm pretty sure they were both, prior to the season starting, top 3 picks. Now, that stuff always changes. But once again, the Ignite kind of just didn't pan out. Their prospects kind of fell from their preseason projections, which kind of been a trend there. And obviously the team, as I just said, is now gone. So rough season in terms of team success for Buzelis. As a player, pretty good size. He is a 4, it feels like. I don't think he's a 3. It feels like he's a 4 or maybe there's a world you play him. If he played center, it'd be a small ball center. He's just 6'9". It's not so much the height, because he does have some decent athleticism. It's more just the size. He's has quite a narrow frame right now. Needs to fill out. But it's a lot of with Buzelis. A lot of these things can be seen as pros or negatives, were areas of improvement. But if you're taking Buzelis, you're buying into him as a shooter. He only shot 26%, but I believe in high school he shot over 40%. Some will say, well, the three-point line's been adjusted, so that's the reason for the drop-off. I think there's plenty of factors. Shot selection, role on the Ignite he was asked to play. So, as well as the three-point line being longer. So, look, it's kind of like I said, if you're taking him, especially if you're the Pistons, you believe in that jumper and you know it's going to work, because you can't take another player that you see as like a upside swing guy like Buzelis and just think that the jumper's not going to work. It has to. You can't have any more non-shooters around Cade in this young core. So you believe in the shooting potential. The stroke actually does look pretty decent. So I'm not sure if he ever becomes a 40% three-point shooter in the league, but I have confidence that he could be like a 34, 35% three-point shooter. Now, is that good enough with what the Pistons have currently in their young core? I don't know. Because not only does the percentage need to be high, the defenses need to respect you. That's an issue we've seen with Isaiah Stewart. He shot the ball really well this season and has improved, but teams still just don't respect that shot. So that's going to be a thing that Buzelis goes through. And the other thing with him is the weak side rim protection. If the three-point shot is legit with him, he's an excellent kind of off-ball defender. On ball, there's questions, but off-ball, those 2.1 blocks, that's a very impressive number. And a lot of them are kind of help side rotations and coming across and swatting his shot from the weak side. So that's something that go really nicely alongside Jalen Duren. I kind of feel like for Buzelis, and this might be wrong, but just to help give Pistons a comparison of maybe who he could be if it panned out like that Jeremy Grant type the Pistons had. Not going to be probably a bit better rebounder than Jeremy, but he's going to be like that perimeter-oriented type skilled four-man who can give you some weak side rim protection. And look, I think Jeremy Grant's probably a better on-ball defender than Buzelis could be, but, you hope he can work into that. And that's kind of just a very Pistons-centric mold. There's plenty of other comparisons out there for him, but just to give you a picture of how I see him kind of panning out if the Pistons were to take him, that would be for me like the ceiling type for him. But enough on Buzelis. I'd love to hear your thoughts on him. Obviously, his agent is Aunt Helm's son, so there's that link, which definitely counts for something. But I believe Donovan Clingan's agent is also Aunt Helm's son. So, take that for what it's worth. I think, I'm not even going to get into that because I know the Pistons has been talking about that what feels like the past 5 months, but it's just something I want to know. Now, fifth and final player on my big board for pick 5 is Dalton Knecht. 23 years old, 6'5" wing out of Tennessee, 22 points a game, 42% from 3, and you can see the other numbers there. When we talk about just taking an NBA-ready player, high floor kind of prospect, Dalton Knecht kind of is the prototype. 4 or 5 years at college, or full 4 years at college, I believe. And, he just seems like a guy who's going to come in and knock down threes day one, no matter what. Has a really nice jumper. So just pulling up my notes here. Really nice jumper. He plays on the wing, which, as I mentioned, with Risacher off the top and Buzelis to a lesser extent, but plays on the wing, shoots a three. Knecht and Risacher. That's the two things I love about these guys. The only reason Knecht's a bit lower is because not so much the age. I think these days the age thing isn't as big of a deal. I remember in the 2010s, taking a player who was 22 years old felt like, their ceiling was caps and they will never be anything more than their ceiling like their potential is so much lower because you've taken him at 22 compared to 20 years old, which I think these days teams are much more inclined to take older prospects. So it's not the age, it's more just he is 6'5". Where like I guess you would play him at the 3 almost exclusively, maybe at the 2. Not like he has like really good verticality. He's a decent athlete. Like he got up for like a heap of dunks. Like go watch his highlights. They're really fun to watch. I'm just kind of wondering what the defense is like for him. That he doesn't really. I don't think his defensive potential, from what I've seen, is near someone like a Risacher. So you're going to get the shooting and the scoring. I feel like you know what you're going to get from him as a rookie. And it's just about how much can he improve, how much more can he become a better defender, and can he continue to grow as kind of an on-ball creator, because that was kind of where he lacked with Tennessee. Like, I feel like for him to be really worth that 5th overall pick, he's going to need to do a little bit off the bounce at some stage. So if you take him at pick 5, I feel like it's because you believe he can be more than just a really good spot up shooter and a really good, like, kind of, I don't know, dribble drive kind of player and transition scorer. But nonetheless, like, I think a lot of Pistons fans, rightfully so, really like the idea of Dalton Knecht coming to Detroit, because Pistons in the past few drafts have kind of gone for those higher upside swings. And I'm not saying they're backfired, but they definitely need players now who can just contribute. And it's kind of been a theme of what I've been talking about this entire kind of off season, is they just need guys who, you know, come in, knock down threes, play some sort of defense. You just know you're going to get every night, not have that unpredictability that we've had with having all these young guys play bulk minutes. So they're my top 5 players. Let me know your thoughts on the order I have them in. Who am I missing? Who would you have at number 1? And yeah, roast me if there's any you think are ridiculous. But the last thing I just want to mention before we get out of here for today's show is the Detroit Shock could be coming back sometime soon. Now, yesterday I saw an article on Sports Illustrated who had put an extract from a Detroit business article. And basically in this piece, they detailed the Pistons have reportedly been in conversation with the WNBA to advocate for the return of the Shock in the league's future expansion plans. So the WNBA currently has 12 teams, and in 2025 and 2026, they'll be expanding to 14 teams, with Golden State getting a team next year, and then the following season, Toronto reportedly have a team coming as well. So it looks like the WNBA is going to expand to an additional 2 more teams by 2028. And that's kind of the area that the Pistons are trying to, or are in discussions for, to kind of be one of those 2 teams that could enter the fold in 27 and 2028. So I think that'd be fun as, like, admittedly, I didn't even follow the Pistons when the Shock were around. They won 3 championships in the 2000s under Bill Laimbeer. I believe he was a coach for all 3. Definitely know he was for 1 or 2. So, yeah, that was a successful franchise. And, you know, there's the tie of, this is kind of where the Jaden Ivey stuff starts. Like Niele Ivey, Jaden's mother played for the Detroit Shock. We've seen Jaden rocking the Detroit Shock jersey to games. So that's a little cool family tie. But, you know, it'd be really cool to see the Pistons get a team back because the WNBA is, you know, on the back of Caitlin Clark and some other players beginning to thrive. And I think it'd just be another cool team to support and, you know, even make content for. So just a cool little story to keep an eye on. But that's going to do it for today's show, guys. I feel like we are going to have some breaking news in the next 48 hours. So I feel like I'm going to be back. But as always, please let me know what your thoughts on the mock draft or my big board. And yeah, as always, until next time, go Pistons.